And welcome to Southern California Edison's community live stream meeting for Cabazon and the surrounding unincorporated communities. My name is Jeremy Goldman, and I'm a Government Relations Manager for Southern California Edison for this area. I know or have met many of you, and I greatly appreciate that you've taken the time to participate this evening, especially in light of the important issues taking place across our communities and the nation. I would like to personally thank Supervisor Jeff Hewitt, the staff at Riverside County, those on the West Desert Municipal Advisory Council, and the many local business owners, along with our federal and state elected officials that have taken time to join us for tonight. We here at Edison appreciate you always having open lines of communication, and we look forward to our ongoing partnership. Let me start by saying we recognize what a stressful time this is and how important it is for you and your families to have electricity while we've been asked to stay at home. We are focused on safely providing reliable service to our customers, and we're continuing to work 24/7 for our communities. Our number one concern remains public safety. As California prepares for the upcoming wildfire season, we want to provide you with the latest information on how we're preparing and what you can do to be prepared. Since we last presented our wildfire mitigation plan and our public safety power shutoff, or PSPS for short, we've made significant progress on hardening our grid from wildfires. We also have heard the valuable feedback that you provided regarding the impacts of PSPS on your homes and businesses. We have several new and improved customer service programs and resources to tell you about this evening. Please know that if you get disconnected or if you need to drop off early, this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on sce.com/wildfire. Again, sce.com/wildfire. Next slide, please. Thank you. As always, your feedback is extremely important to us, and we encourage you to submit questions. Because we have a large number of attendees tonight, we will be taking questions through the Skype Q&A window. You should be able to see the chat box on the right-hand side. If there is a similar question already being asked that you would like answered, you can click on the heart icon next to the question to like it. We will address the questions that receive the most likes first and go down from there. We ask that you please ask questions that are relevant to the topic and the material being presented. We will do our very best to answer as many questions as possible in the allotted time tonight. Next slide, please. Here are tonight's presenters. I will cover a few more topics before handing it over to Bill Chu, Managing Director in the Transmission and Distribution Organization, to discuss our wildfire mitigation efforts. You will then hear from Mark Ulrich, Vice President of Customer Service Operations, who will update you on new and improved customer care programs and our community engagement. Next slide, please. For tonight's agenda, we will cover wildfire preparedness tips, provide an overview of SCE's response to COVID-19, review 2019 lessons learned from last year's wildfire season, and discuss what's new for 2020. Discuss SCE's wildfire mitigation plan and PSPS specific to this area. Provide information on our customer care programs and highlight our community engagement efforts for the coming months. Provide additional safety message, and then at the end, we will open up for Q&A. Next slide, please. I know this area is very familiar with wildfires and preparedness, but I wanted to take a moment to remind us all of a few safety tips. The graphic on this slide is from CAL FIRE's Ready, Set, Go program. The first component, Get Ready, is asking folks to be prepared before a wildfire threatens our community. We can all do this by creating defensible space and hardening our homes, which you can protect them from radiant heat and embers that can fly long distances. Also, make sure you know how to release your automatic garage door and practice opening it manually with all the drivers in your family. The second stage is to get set, which is asking us to be prepared for the possibility of evacuation. And we can do this by creating a wildfire action plan, similar to our earthquake plans, putting together an emergency supply kit or go bag with essential items, including prescriptions, having a family communication plan to reconnect with your family members following an evacuation, and by backing your car and trailers into the driveway for a quick exit. The last stage is to go. If you have time, prepare the inside of your house by shutting all windows and doors, remove flammable window coverings, turn off gas at the meter, then off your pilot lights, leave your lights on, and turn off your air conditioning. You can prepare the outside of your home by gathering flammable items from around your house and bringing them inside, connecting garden hoses, turning off your sprinklers, leaving exterior lights on, and making sure your emergency kit is in your vehicle. Lastly, dress appropriately: long pants, long sleeve shirt, heavy shoes or boots, and make sure to have eye protection. That was a quick overview, but more information can be found at CAL FIRE's readyforwildfire.org or your local fire agency. Next slide, please. Our thoughts are with the individuals and families who have been affected and impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. As I stated before, the safety and well-being of our workers, customers, and the public remains our top priority. Safely providing reliable service also means critical scheduled outages must continue even during this unprecedented time. Postponing this critical work can inadvertently create a larger and more dangerous risks. As such, we continue to perform critical work to make urgent repairs, maintain our network, and to protect communities from the threat of wildfires. We are also continuing to move forward with the important work such as the West of Devers upgrade project in this area, where we are upgrading existing transmission lines between San Bernardino, Colton, and North Palm Springs to increase capacity to bring a renewable and a conventional generation from eastern Riverside County to the power grid and help meet California's clean energy climate change goals. Having said that, we are doing everything we can to minimize outage impacts, especially for vulnerable customers, businesses, and other critical services. We are prioritizing and evaluating each outage on a case-by-case basis. If an outage is deemed critical, considerations are put in place to minimize its duration and impact, such as scheduling outage overnight and increasing the number of crews on a project in order to shorten the length of that outage. I want to also mention that when you see our crews working in the field, please know that we are happy to answer questions about the work we are doing. We ask, however, that the community continue to observe the physical distancing guidelines of staying at least 6 feet away and wearing face coverings. This will protect you and our crews. During COVID-19, we have also enhanced our customer care programs to support our customers during this time of need. For example, we have suspended service disconnections for non-payment and are waiving late fees for customers impacted by the pandemic. As of June 1st, we reinstated normal operations for large businesses customers, except at risk and critical business customers. We will continue to work with these customers for payment arrangements to avoid disconnection. We've also relaxed customer requirements for folks to enroll in our medical baseline and care programs. Our SCE employees also live and work in the communities that we serve, and we truly care about our communities. To help Californians who are facing economic hardships, Edison International pledged $1 million at the onset of the pandemic to local nonprofits, including $345,000 to the Inland Empire Community Foundation, which serves Riverside and San Bernardino counties. An additional $259,000 was donated from our employees, which brought our total community aid to more than $1.2 million. We know things will continue to change. We will continue to be here for you and keep you updated as we work through this crisis together. At this time, I will hand it over to Bill to discuss our wildfire mitigation efforts.
Great. Thank you, Jeremy. And thank you to all of you, our customers and our community stakeholders. We really value your participation and engagement. I wanted to talk a little bit about the wildfire risk that we're all facing. We really are responding to the greatest societal challenge of our time, which is climate change and its impact, including wildfires. Changes to California climate means that the traditional notion of the wildfire season no longer exists. We have hazardous fuel that are building up around us, across the state, nearly 147 million trees that have been killed or weakened by drought conditions or bark beetle infestations. And while springtime rains have resulted in overgrown brushes that will dry out during the summer season. We have 10 of the state's 20 most destructive wildfires that have happened since 2015. And about a little bit over a quarter of our service area is in our high fire risk area as determined by the California Public Utility Commission's fire map rulemaking process that included a variety of stakeholders. Many of them are in the environmental science community. In addition to wildfire, greenhouse gas reduction to address the climate change is another critical societal challenge of our time. And there's a little known fact regarding the nexus between wildfire and greenhouse gas reduction. One of the recent US Geological Survey studies shows that greenhouse gas emission from the 2018 California wildfire is on par with the entire year's worth of emission from all the electricity generation combined that are feeding the needs of the California. So unless we can effectively and aggressively eliminate these wildfires, knowing that not all of these wildfires are caused by utility power lines, we will be back to our starting point on this journey to reverse the greenhouse gas emission. So this is really important to us. And executing our long-term vision cannot happen without adapting our businesses and helping our community to adapt to the impact of climate change. And so we're doubling down on our efforts to prevent and respond to wildfires. So next slide, please. So next, I want to talk a little bit about what we've done in the past, in the recent past last year, and what we learned from those lessons, and then how we're applying that to our program going forward in this year. So as you're aware, in the past year, when there is a high risk of wildfire, we may declare what's called PSPS, Public Safety Power Shutoff, and temporarily shut off power to your neighborhood to prevent our electric system from becoming the source of an ignition. We recognize and appreciate the impact of a PSPS event to you and our customers, and we absolutely do not take lightly any decision to proactively de-energize a portion of our grid. We recognize that PSPS is a very disruptive hardship, and it's necessary to protect a community from catastrophic wildfires. We do conduct patrols after PSPS events and have found in the past multiple instances of equipment damage and tree branch that gets tangled up in our power lines that could have ignited a fire. While we are taking every effort to reduce the number and the length of PSPS, we will continue to use these outages as required to protect public safety. The PSPS event that transpired last year in many ways reinforced the work that we're doing and is one of the area that we continue to place a lot of emphasis in trying to minimize its impact. Some of the mitigation tools that we have put in place are, we wanted to make sure that we are actively addressing these issues. And the lessons that we learned is helping us to refine our process on a going forward basis. Let me talk a little bit about the wildfire mitigation tools that we have. Last year, we met or exceeded nearly all the goals in our wildfire mitigation plan. This year, we are on the right track when it comes to deployment of grid hardening technologies such as covered conductor and sectionalizing devices. The combination of two will help to reduce the frequency of PSPS over time under normal expected weather conditions. We're also focusing a lot on our customers. We recognize the difficulty of PSPS event can create, and we are committed to support and assist our customers in the community. We'll touch on this a bit more detail later when Mark speaks about this area. But at a high level, we are continuing proactively to outreach to the community prior to peak fire seasons to help with preparedness. We're also improving our communication to our customers to make information more readily available and easily accessible. In terms of stakeholder engagement, we've also increased our collaboration with stakeholders and other partners such as community-based organizations to better assess vulnerable customers. Particularly, as Jeremy mentioned, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we recognize the greater inconvenience created by the PSPS for customers working and learning at home. And we are also exploring and implementing changes to our PSPS approach as it remains necessary to support public safety. Some of the adjustments we're making, including adjusting plans to safely provide in-person service where practicable and with proper precaution, enhancing virtual services to customer. An example of that is creating application and web pages to provide information, directing customer to these available resources. We're looking to accelerate coordination with county and state emergency management officials to ensure preparedness and contingency planning measurements are in place for critical infrastructure providers. We're prioritizing identification of healthcare facilities and other critical infrastructure providers that are supporting COVID-19 response, including additional temporary medical facilities. Let's go to the next slide, please. So next, I want to talk a little bit about the specific about wildfire mitigation plan. Next. So before I get into the detail, I think it's worthwhile to provide some sort of grounding context, if you will. Our wildfire mitigation plan is really grounded on the foundation of fire science. And what you see here on the slide, it's really hopefully familiar to you. It's a fire triangle. And if you think about it, these are the three key elements that are required to start and to sustain a fire. You need to have a heat source, you have to have the burnable fuel, and to the left, this side, the oxygen, which is, think of it as a catalyst to propel the fire. And so in this case, what we're really focusing on is elements of our operation plan, improvements in our infrastructures to tackle all three sides of these fire triangle, to reduce, if not eliminate the sources of ignition, to progressively address the vegetations that are near our power lines. We can't do anything about the oxygen, but we certainly can get better at predicting weather conditions. So I'll talk more about that a bit later. But so this essentially forms the foundational key pillars of our wildfire mitigation strategy. If you go to the next slide, please. So our number one priority remains the safety of the public, our customers, our employees, the first responders, and our wildfire mitigation plan is designed to further that commitment. Our plan focuses on hardening of our infrastructures, bolstering situational awareness, and enhancing operational practices to keep our communities safe. We made significant progress. We made significant progress in 2019, and will continue to build on that this year in 2020. We propose to deploy more than 850 weather stations by the end of this year. So far, we have 720 installed today. This will allow us to better forecast potential wildfire conditions, and using the over 160 wildfire high definition camera that we have installed throughout our service area, it will provide a cover or a visual vantage point on high fire risk area so that we could be more effective in collaborating with our fire suppression responders in responding to fire events when they do occur. We have replaced more than 700 miles of power lines with insulated wires in 2020 and installing fast acting fuses at more than 3,000 locations to help reduce wildfire risk. As you can see on this chart, so far we have installed over 12,000 of these devices or locations to better respond to these type of conditions to reduce the source of ignitions. And we're continuing to conduct inspections in our infrastructure in high fire risk area, particularly in the Cabazon neighborhood. You may see more frequent aerial inspections over the next couple of weeks. This is part of the program that we have to identify potential system anomalies so we could correct these issues before it becomes a problem for us. And we're also deploying and testing new technologies. These include leveraging machine learnings, artificial intelligence, and advanced risk modeling to make informed decisions and to focus on where to target our work, prioritize the wildfire mitigation activities that I described. We also have an emergency response team that is readily available, and those are folks are FEMA trained to ensure that we can work seamlessly with federal, state, and local emergency management organizations. You go to the next slide, please. So one of the key focus area in terms of enhancing our operational practices is vegetation management. We currently inspect about 1.1 million trees across our service area every year to determine if they could pose a hazard by making contact with our power lines. About half of those, 500,000 or so, are in high fire risk area, as I mentioned, that are identified by California Public Utility Commission. And in these high fire risk area, the work includes creating a minimum of 12-foot clearance at the time of trim between tree and our power lines to prevent vegetation from coming in contact with our power lines and to avoid potentially sparking a blaze. In addition, tree up to 200 feet away from our wires will be assessed and may be removed if they demonstrate a high risk of falling into the lines or have vegetation like palm fronds that could get carried into our power lines under high wind conditions. So managing tree growth and other vegetation will help make communities safer, but in some cases could be dramatic change in terms of how the tree would look, creating concerns among residents, and we fully understand and appreciate that. And this is an area where we like to have dialogues and to help address these risks as well. So as part of the program, we will continue to remove dead, dying, and diseased trees in high fire risk areas. Specifically in the Cabazon area, we're going to be trimming along the distribution line, and this work is scheduled in the month of June. We're also going to be trimming along our transmission line. That work is scheduled earlier in the year. Specifically, we had some of our high voltage line that go through this area, both in the month of January and also in the month of April. We're also performing inspection throughout the year that may result in ad hoc work outside of these timeframes that I just mentioned. In addition, abatement occurs on our transmission corridors at the request of Riverside County Fire Departments, and approximately 10 parcels under the Devers Valley transmission lines are scheduled to be mowed between now and the end of July. So you're going to see some activities there. We're creating fire breaks along the road and under our wires. We also clear all vegetation in a 10-foot radius around our distribution pole for fire protection. Historically, we brush certain poles that contain equipment that could spark and cause a fire in high fire risk area. But now, for wildfire resiliency, we're essentially brushing all the poles, basically clearing out the vegetation up to a 10-foot radius underneath the pole. Of course, there are some exceptions that are made in certain areas, and pole brushing is currently in progress. And there's still roughly in the range of 1,000 pole that remains to be cleared in the Cabazon areas. In addition, we have hazardous trees and that are being assessed as part of the effort. We did that last year, and there are no additional assessment or hazard tree removal that are scheduled this year in 2020. If we could go to the next slide. So earlier I mentioned about getting better at predicting weather. This is where this weather station really comes in handy for us, and it's really important that we have ability to improve and advance our weather forecasting and modeling capability. We have a staff of meteorologists and weather forecasting models that will use this information to provide the most precise forecasting possible, which help to identify areas of wildfire risk. As I mentioned, we have large number of weather stations that are already installed. Specifically in the Cabazon area, we have 10 weather stations that are installed, and we have 7 additional that are being planned to be installed by the end of this year. So all of these weather stations are providing real-time weather information, and our weather modeling with involving supercomputers are ingesting all this information. And so what this does is allow us to get much better at predicting potential wildfire conditions. The size of SCE's service territory in high fire risk area and its diverse terrain requires a dense network of weather stations to monitor local specific real-time conditions. And SCE plans to expand deployment of these stations in 2020, in part due to realizing that even greater benefit than what we have previously expected. For example, the data they provide is allowing more targeted de-energization during a PSPS event. We plan to have upwards of 2,600 weather stations by the year 2024. I think by the end of this year, our company will have one of the country's largest and densest network of weather stations. Specifically, as I mentioned, in the Cabazon area, we installed 10 and plan to do 7 more by the end of this year. And having these local weather information is very important to SCE as we evaluate the need for public safety power shutoff, rather than relying on other publicly available weather data, which covers a large swath of area. So these weather stations that we have installed give us ability to monitor weather data at a very specific local level. And in this area, we have multiple weather stations, which will help to provide information we need to reduce the number of customers impacted by PSPS and reduce really the footprint of the circuit that will be impacted by PSPS. If we could go to the next slide, please. This next area talks about one of the key pillars of our system hardening effort, and this is the idea of the cover conductor as opposed to the traditional bare uninsulated conductor that are being used as an industry standard. We have installed 6 miles of cover conductor of insulated wires in the area and would plan to install additional 37 miles by the end of this year. This is specific to the Cabazon area. Based on our past experience, we see many of the ignitions associated with utility infrastructure are caused by objects that come in contact with our power lines or conductor to conductor slapping together under high wind conditions. So by installing these cover conductor, it greatly reduces the risk and has proven to be very effective preventive measure in the industry. So we are targeting the highest risk area for near-term deployment, as well as area with cover conductor that can reduce the need for PSPS over the longer term. Okay, we go to the next slide, please. So next, I wanted to talk a little bit about the improvements that we're making in terms of operating flexibility. And this is with the idea of wanting to minimize the footprint or the impact of PSPS when we deem that as a necessary action for us to protect the safety of our community. What you're seeing here is actually an example of an actual circuit serving the neighborhood. If you take a look at the picture, the diagram here give you sort of a marker. The orange lines at the very top of the picture here is actually Interstate 10. And so what we're seeing here is the area just outside, just south of the Interstate 10. And in fact, this is the Fingal circuit. So all of the Fingal circuit is located in the Tier 3 high fire risk area as designated by, again, CPUC, meaning that it has the highest fire risk. The map shows how our distribution covers the area to serve each of the customers throughout. And each of the color represents how we have divided the circuit into sections for analysis and potential scope for de-energization. So in this case, you're seeing really 2 different colors. There is a purple lines, that's one section, and there is the green line, that's the other sections. So by isolating the circuit into different parts, it allows us some flexibility in terms of how we will operationalize PSPS. So over the past year, we've accelerated installation on switching devices that are remotely controlled on circuits to isolate areas within each of the circuits. So doing a non-PSPS conditions, these switch allow SCE to selectively de-energize one of these areas based on real-time conditions, or sometimes reroute power to another circuit to a non-affected areas, and doing so will minimize customer outage time. Doing PSPS event, we've used these switches to minimize the number of customers that are being de-energized. So as illustrated in this example, if the green portion of the circuit was meeting the condition where we would need to de-energize that section while potentially keeping the remaining areas, the purple area, energized. And so we will be reviewing each of the circuits separately depending on weather conditions, what are we seeing from our weather stations, and what information are we gathering in the field with our subject matter experts, our experienced linemen and troublemen that are reporting real-time information to us. So if we're able to sectionalize our circuit more effectively, this both reduces the impact of PSPS as well as facilitates faster restoration. The more we are able to sectionalize our circuit to a smaller impacted footprint, this will also speed up the restoration because we have less circuits that we will have to patrol and inspect. I want to stress that this obviously depends on the weather condition at the time where we're encountering these events. Again, this inspection and patrol after the PSPS event, after the wind has subsided, is a really important safety precaution steps that we must take to ensure safety. Because the last thing we want is to re-energize a circuit that has been compromised during the period of time when it was turned off. So it's really important that we take our time to make sure that we're inspecting these appropriately. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So what does this all mean for the Cabazon areas? As we discussed, we're working to harden our electric grid to reduce the chances of starting a wildfire. An additional benefit is a reduction in the number of customer de-energized during PSPS events. We analyzed the grid hardening activities we have completed and estimated that if the weather condition were same as last year, we expect to see roughly a 15 to 40% reduction in the number of customer de-energized. This number will continue to improve as we make additional improvements in the coming years. And I realize de-energizing, it's very disruptive, which is why we're offering several customer care programs, some of which are especially designed around this particular area, and Mark will go into that a little bit later. For now, let me talk a little bit more specifically about PSPS. If we could go to the next slide, please. Okay, so as in past year, when there is a high risk for wildfire, we declare public safety power shutoff event and temporarily turn off power to your neighborhood to prevent our electric system from becoming the source of ignition. The California Public Utility Commission gives us the authority to protect public safety, and PSPS is one of the means to doing so. PSPS will be used as a complementary to our infrastructure hardening measures when weather conditions threaten power lines in a way that presents an imminent danger to public safety. It is used during elevated fire conditions, and it primarily impacts circuits in high fire risk area. In rare instances, other circuits in non-high fire risk area may be impacted if transmission lines are also involved. But those are really much less likely to occur. It's a more rare occurrence. As more mitigations are deployed, the company expects to reduce the scope and impact of PSPS, but PSPS will have to remain available as a tool to mitigate wildfire risk during severe weather and high fire potential index events. Let's go to the next slide, please. I want to talk a little bit about the decisions that leading up to a PSPS event. And so our decision to shut off power, obviously, as I mentioned before, is something that we take it very seriously, and it's a dynamic set of conditions. These decisions are made by considering many factors which are impacted by prevailing and all anticipated weather conditions. So some of the factors we considered in deciding when to shut off power for public safety reasons include things like red flag warning, the issuance of National Weather Service red flag warning for high fire risk conditions in our service area. We look to our meteorologists that are providing ongoing assessments of our in-house weather forecasts using high-resolution weather models. We're gathering data from our weather stations and publicly available weather stations. All these information are feeding into our weather model, and we're generating what's called a fire potential index, which is a tool that utilizes weather forecasts and fuel condition to assess the wildfire risk. We're looking at wind speed, particularly when they exceed or are expected to exceed National Weather Service wind advisory level or exceed the top 1% of historical wind speed in the area. Again, I mentioned earlier, a lot of our ignition comes as a result of objects that gets blown into our power line under high wind condition. Typically is not the case where the wind actually caused damage to the infrastructure, but rather is the wind causing objects such as palm fronds and tree branches and metallic balloons and tent tarps that gets blown into our power line and created ignition that way. So wind speed are particularly important when we consider in combination with other local conditions such as dry vegetation that could present a true hazard for the community. Wind speed threshold may also be adjusted based on other factors or circuit designs. Public authority, we're all doing these type of events, having a very active ongoing dialogue. We're listening to specific concerns that are from the state, local fire authorities, or emergency management personnel or law enforcement regarding public safety issues. Of course, we understand and expect the impacts of turning off power to essential services such as public safety agency, water pumps, traffic controls. And there's other operational considerations such as the state of potentially impacted circuits, the degree of flying debris, and the condition of our power line in the field. When possible and safe during extreme fire weather conditions, we can deploy on-the-ground observer in high fire risk area to also provide additional monitoring and reporting live conditions in real time. Let's go to the next slide, please. So next, I want to talk a little bit about the timeline of events leading up to an eventual PSPS decision. SE remains committed to provide timely notification to potentially impacted customers, local governments, public safety agencies, and California State Warning Center under our Cal-OES, so Office of Emergency Services, before, during, and after de-energization event. SE will continue to work with local government and public safety agencies, as well as essential service providers and business customers to refine this program. We aim to provide priority notification to first responder, public safety partners, and local governments 72 hours before a potential PSPS. Additional updates are made again at 24 hours interval. Now we begin initial notification to remaining customers up to 48 hours in advance of a potential PSPS event. Notifications are then made to these customers in 24-hour interval to provide an update. It could be a situation where weather conditions have changed and there's no longer a need for PSPS. We will let the customer know. Or if the weather condition have continued to sustain itself and we are predicting the need to de-energize a portion of the circuit, we will again reaffirm this notification to our customers. As we get close to the actual event, there's a lot of dynamic issues happening, but we'll make every attempt to notify customer at the 1 to 4 hour window in advance of the actual de-energization. Now, given the unpredictability of the shifting weather during PSPS events, this may not be always possible, but we do strive to make this notification as a sort of a advance warning if we're able to do so. And again, we will attempt to notify customer before re-energization, wherever possible. So though SCE will continue to make every effort to reduce the duration of PSPS event, re-energization is feasible only after what we call a post-event patrol conducted after adverse weather conditions have abated. Verification are completed by field personnel that electrical equipment can be energized safely and identify damages to equipment and structure that have been remediated. So I think this is the time where I hand over to Mark to discuss our customer care program and our engagement effort. Mark?
Thank you, Bill, and thank you to the Cabazon community for joining us tonight. You guys play a very important role tonight and going forward. First, we want to hear from you and make sure we're considering the Cabazon specific needs that you guys may have. And the second is we want to ensure that we answer your questions so that you can help share this additional safety knowledge with your neighbors and community peers. So I wanted to remind everyone that there's a chat window in the Skype tonight that you can add some questions there. A few have already been added there. And then you can also, there's a little heart next to each of the questions, and that allows you to click on the heart to say that's a question that you would like answered also. And what that does is it kind of floats that question to the top, and we'll start from there down. At the conclusion of my remarks, we'll move back to Jeremy, and then Jeremy will start to handle the questions and see if we can answer them all tonight. So another reminder is that this video is going to be recorded, and it'll be available at sce.com/wildfire. I'll give you some more contact information, so you might get a pen and pencil a little bit later, but again, this will be on the website if you need it. So at SCE, our goal is to keep our communities and our customers informed, help them be better prepared for emergencies, and directing them to resources where they can receive aid. In addition to being the Vice President of Customer Service Operations, I'm also a PSPS Incident Commander, and I've had the unfortunate duty to make decisions on whether or not to de-energize certain circuits and customers. This is a great inconvenience, and we apologize for that, but it's important at the time that we do it for safety purposes. We would rather have homes without power than wildfires. Next slide. So one of the things that we've done when we were looking at our performance last year with PSPS and our performance where it needs to be versus where it was we wanted to make sure that we improved our communications. This includes the website improvements. This is information where you can pull. We have created a PSPS webpage now that has not just information about what public safety power shutoff is, but it also has maps in there. And you can see in those maps very clearly where the fire weather is. You can see additional PSPS information. You can see maps to be able to provide where is your home with regard to high fire risk area. Is my home in a period of concern with regard to PSPS, and I need to be prepared for a potential power shutoff. And then also in there, and we'll talk a little bit later about when we get to customer programs, the maps will also show, do we have a community resource center that is energized that can help provide services to the customers during that time, as well as community crew vehicles. Where have we parked our community crew vehicles out there to help customers? So a lot of things we did in the last 6 months was improvements around the website to provide this information, including restoration times. And we also increased significantly the capacity of our website. In addition to the pull information, where a customer can go pull information that might be out there around PSPS, we also have push information, which is our notifications. And we're pushing the notifications in a couple different ways. One is by applying the zip code opportunity for anybody that wants to get a PSPS notification for a particular zip code. This is helpful for community members that may not be a direct account holder, An example is mobile home parks, or where there's a master meter and sub meters. The customers in the territory can go into the website, type in a zip code, give us some contact information and your choice of contact, whether it's a text, an email, or a phone call. And anytime we have a PSPS event and there's a notification that goes out for that particular zip code, you'll get a notification. This is also helpful if you have family members or peers that you want to keep track of, and they may be in a different zip code or on a different circuit or not near you. I do this for my mother who lives in Sacramento. And so whenever she's on a particular circuit and that circuit is in a PSPS event, I get notifications. So this is an additional push that we did. In addition to that, and even before that, every single customer has the opportunity to get alerts and notifications. And again, those specific to their address, not just the zip code, but their address, their service address. And that will be, again, if you want it by text, we'll give it by text. If you want it by email, we'll give it by email, by voice call, or even TTY formats for hearing impaired. And not only can you sign yourself and your contact information, but you can sign up others and their contact information too for those notifications. And another area we've been improving notifications is by leveraging existing companies out there that have apps like Nextdoor. They have an app where neighbors can communicate with one another, and now we're able to provide emergency notifications and PSPS notifications there. We also will be pushing very quickly with Google any individual, not just customer, but any individual that has any Google product on their mobile phone, mobile device, whether it's Google Maps or anything else. Eventually we'll get to a point where if their phone is located in an area where there's going to be a PSPS alert or event, then that alert will pop up on the individual's mobile device, similar to an Amber Alert. It's the common alert protocols. It won't be as loud. It'll be a lot more subtle, but it'll allow customers and non-customers who happen to be traveling through a PSPS area to get notifications. So it was really important to us. It was really clear that one of the frustrations as a customer who's going through a PSPS event, and not only was I an incident commander last year, but I was also a customer going through one of the events. It's frustrating to not have information. So it was one of the most important things for us to do was to give you guys situational awareness about the events that are occurring as early as 2 to 3 days in advance, and then when to expect power to be restored if it has been put out. Next slide. In addition to the enhancements in our communication, one of the other things that was really important for us to do was to ensure that we had additional programs for our customers. These programs were to try to mitigate some of the headache and pain that goes with power de-energization. And so two big sources there are our community resources. So we have community crew vehicles, and there's a picture here of a van. And then we also have negotiated with some community resource centers. And the centers are brick and mortar, and the vans are obviously vehicles. We've had to adjust both how we operate the vans and the vehicles and the resource centers due to COVID-19, but we've had an event about 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago where we were able to test out some of our protocols. So in one of the protocols at the resource center, we had social distancing, very similar to if you've been to Home Depot or other major stores where they separate customers by a certain amount. Those customers were able to come to the resource centers and get to-go bags of device chargers, information, ICE vouchers, other things that might help them, and then ask questions about the particular event that's going on. In the other site where we had a community crew vehicle, we did a drive-through option instead. where our employees were in personal protective equipment, and then customers would drive in through the parking lot to get a similar bag or ask questions. And that was another good place for us to be able to provide answers to questions, as well as point customers to certain resources. So that was one of the other things we wanted to do, is make sure we were out in the field with our customers in these PSPS events. In addition, there's been a series of rebates and other programs. One is called the Self-Generation Incentive Program. It goes by the acronym of SGIP, and that provides rebates for whole home energy storage as well as others. The initial allocation of those rebates have already been allocated, but we're currently at the Public Utilities Commission asking for several $100 million more of these SGIP rebates to be provided through from 2021 all the way through 2025. So the SGIP program is one way. Another is we provide now $50 rebates for small appliance battery backups. You can find these at our website, and I'll give you more information in another 2 slides. So that $50 rebate helps displace some of the cost of battery storage that will help customers with regard to their appliances. In addition to the small appliance device battery, we also have a well water dependent customer rebate program. This is customers who are not on a water system, but actually their own well water. And in this case, we've identified a small segment of customers in high fire risk areas that are dependent on this, the wells and pumping, to be able to get their water pressure up. And then when those customers lose power, their ability to pump is really difficult. So for those, we launched that program today. It provides up to $500 rebate for low-income customers and $300 rebate for all other customers that are dependent on well water. In addition to that, we're launching in June and July a pilot for income qualified backup battery. This is for customers who are on critical medical devices that are electricity is important for their life-sustaining comforts. And what is important there is that we will be able to provide battery backup systems for these critical care customers so that their equipment can be energized for a 24-hour period. And that's should cover a good portion of the PSPS events, but not perhaps all, but it will give the customers the capability to prepare for a long event. This program will go in full effect in September, but we're going to be piloting in June and July. I have in the Cabazon area listed 11 critical care customers who signed up for our program. There's a program called Medical Baseline, and inside that Medical Baseline program, you can click a box that says, I cannot live without power for my medical equipment longer than 2 hours. And so a subset of those medical baseline customers are these critical care customers. And if you happen to be in one of these conditions, we'd love for you to sign up for the medical baseline and critical care program so we can help serve you more. Finally, one of the other things we're working on is resiliency zones. And this is an idea that we're going to be piloting over the next 6 to 7 months, where when a community is de-energized, it's important, and we found this through COVID, it's important that we get certain services back up and operating in those communities. So an example of that is there might need to be a grocery store that has energy, or a gas station, or a pharmacy during these de-energizations, especially if they're longer in period. And so we'll be working with the communities and other areas to identify those types of services that exist in the community that we can re-energize. Next slide. So one of the things we're doing is talking to our communities. And last year we launched and continued to have a robust community outreach effort to help our customers prepare for wildfire related events. SCE conducted over 550 meetings and presentations with local government, public safety partners, tribal officials, and community-based organizations, and the general public last year in 2019. we continue on similar pace in 2020 to have meetings like this to ensure that we can listen to the communities, respond to the communities, and provide information that's critical for them to improve their resiliency. So we plan to continue throughout this year hosting virtual community meetings, meetings with local and tribal governments, as well as safety partners. You'll see advertising on both radio and digital to improve education of what a PSPS is and how to better prepare. And you'll see a lot of efforts about us sharing our wildfire mitigation activities. In addition, there'll be letters coming out that we call Dear Neighbor letters that'll be providing more information if people were not able to make one of these meetings for all the customers in our service territory. And these will be going out, they started out in May. You may have received one already. We also sent them out in early June. And every customer in our service territory should be getting a letter about, or an email about PSPS. Finally, with regard to customer specific information, one of the things we have been doing is reaching out to our vulnerable communities. And in our vulnerable communities, these are customers who may have limited English speaking capabilities. They may have disabilities and unable to have equal access or early access to transportation. Maybe customers who, as I said before, are medical baseline or critical care customers. And one of the things we've been doing is engaging our partners, both at the county level as well as others, meeting with some of the 211 organizations, independent living centers, so that we can ensure we can help coordinate responses and resiliency during PSPS events. This is an important part of what we do. In addition, when customers sign up for medical baseline and they're a critical care customer, all of our notifications that I talked about earlier, if we don't get a positive contact back from a critical care customer, we will follow up manually and call every single piece of information that we have to contact that critical care customer to ensure that they've received notice about the potential PSPS event. And then eventually, if we still have not made contact, we will actually physically send an Edison employee to the door to knock to make sure that critical care customer is informed that there's a potential PSPS event. So this is very important for us to get to our vulnerable community members and help them through some of these events. So the next thing I want to talk about on the next slide is investing in our communities. Well, we are spending quite a bit of philanthropy money and charitable investments to allow our partners with a lot of the nonprofits that we work with serve the diverse ethnic groups, seniors, women, disabled, and low-income families, among others. These partnerships allow us to have a greater impact than we would if we tried to do this ourselves. And so teaming with these other organizations help make those dollars go farther and improve the resiliency for all involved. We've identified new and additional nonprofit partners to augment the existing public safety and emergency preparedness grants. This helps support wildfire mitigation in addition to PSPS events and community readiness, not just for wildfires and PSPS, but other events, including earthquakes, etc. And next slide. So one of the things I want to make sure we get from you guys is feedback. And so one way is to provide feedback. You're going to be receiving an email survey, or you can go to our website, and our website's listed here on slide 26. And in that website, in that email address or this phone number, you can call us and ask us questions, share with us information you think we ought to know about to help us make our customers more resilient. And so please provide us some specific feedback. Name and addresses or service accounts will help us get to where we need to go. In addition to that, we have, if you have not signed up for PSPS alerts, or you would like to sign up for the medical baseline program, please do so at our website. You can find all of that at sce.com/wildfire. You also find our programs and rebates there. And in addition, you'll find some checklists on how to be prepared, not just for power outages, but also for other emergencies. At this point, I'm going to hand it back to Jeremy, and we'll go through some of the questions that might have hit the chat box.
Great. Well, thank you very much to Bill and Mark. We are going to now open up to Q&A, and thank you to everyone who have submitted their questions. Just to remind you, please submit them. We are here to answer them. So why don't we get going? This is probably a question for Bill. Bill, can you talk about the amount of covered conductor that's been installed in the Cabazon area to date?
Yeah, sure, certainly. So thanks for that question. So as I mentioned, covered conductor is one of our key pillars of system hardening measures. We have installed, I think, what was the number I referenced earlier? 6 miles of covered conductors that have already been installed, and we plan on installing additional 37 miles of covered conductor. All of these installation will take place in what we term the high fire risk area, which is determined through the fire hazards mapping process that California Public Utility Commission have facilitated. Just to give you sort of a range of ideas, not every single miles in high fire risk area needs to be covered. An example of that is a portion of our line covered through travel or traverse through developed communities where there's paved roads and parking lots and so forth. So if the ignition does occur or spark that's generated from a contact with our power lines, it doesn't pose the type of risk, say in a rural area where it's exposed to lots of dry vegetation. So we have robust modeling that help us determine where to prioritize the deployment of covered conductor. In the area of Cabazon, we have roughly 77 miles of circuits that are being planned for covered conductor in our overall plan. So hopefully that answers your question.
Gotcha. Thank you, Bill. Looks like we have another question for Bill. Bill, can you talk about the use of LiDAR technology and what SE is specifically looking for when we are using it?
Yeah, certainly. So LiDAR stands for Light Ranging and Detection Technology, is used to give you a three-dimensional profile or a very precise measurement of distance between objects. And basically, we could fly these LiDAR equipment that are mounted on helicopters, and it will capture a three-dimensional profile of our transmission line, including all the adjacent objects, whether it be vegetations or buildings, and we have a precise measurements of a distance between these objects. So this is one of the technology that we use to assess the distance. Earlier I mentioned about we're conducting inspection program is a very important component of our wildfire mitigation effort. Part of this inspection program, we use other technologies such as infrared to detect hot spots on our electrical power lines. We use what's called corona camera to detect potential insulation degradations. And so these are other type of technology that we have deployed in part of our inspection program.
Thank you, Bill. Just a reminder, please submit your questions. We're here and ready to answer them. If you're not able to get your questions submitted, you can send us an email at wildfireoutreach@sce.com, and we'll be sure to get you a response back. But we have a few more questions tonight. Question, are you going to share the vulnerable critical care customers with first responders? Mark, is that something you can assist with? We might have lost him.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. We do share some information with our government partners with regard to emergency operations. And I don't recall if we give specific customer service addresses, et cetera, but we've been working with most of our counties to ensure some non-disclosure agreements and ensure privacy of our customers as we share this information. There's many customers that are critical care customers that want their first responders in their county to know that they are critical care customers, and there are several customers that do not want the government to know anything about their health. And we're kind of stuck between a federal law, the HIPAA law, but we do share where we can as much information as possible about our critical care customers within the guidelines and requirements that we have.
Thank you, Mark. There's another question about accessing the PowerPoint of the recording, and yes, this will actually be made available online at sce.com/wildfire safety meetings in the next 3 or 4 days. And there's another question about the weather stations. How could one access the weather station data? Bill, is that something you can touch on? A member of the
board. Yeah, certainly, Jeremy. So thanks for that question. So actually, we have made all these data available to the public domain. I believe earlier in the chat, we posted a link where anybody could access this information through the sce.com website. It will take you to a third party that's hosted by MesoWest, where all the weather stations are listed. You can click on the particular weather station and get actual real-time information. Again, the data there is refreshed every 10 minutes. You get temperature, humidity, wind speed, solar irradiance. So it's a really valuable information, and that's completely available and open to the public. Thank you.
Gotcha. And the website to go to is sce.com/fire weather. So.
Yes, thank you.
Gotcha. And you can access those locations throughout the Edison service territory of the weather station. So take a look. It's updated, refreshed on a regular basis. So looks like we have another question for Mark. Mark, what is the best way for a customer to sign up to be notified about any type of outage, a maintenance outage, a repair outage, a PSPS? And also, can you talk about the process for a customer to sign up for the medical baseline program?
Absolutely. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
All right. Good. And I may have fixed my video. I'm not 100% sure. So at sce.com, the easiest way to both sign up for alerts as well as the medical baseline program. On the first one, on the alerts, as you go to sce.com, one of the first banners that pops up is have you signed up for PSPS or outage alerts? If you have not, you can click directly on that and then give your service account information and then your preferences on how you'd like to be communicated with, whether it's email, text, phone, and it can be both mobile phone as well as landlines, as well as TTY for hearing impaired. So that's how you sign up for both PSPS alerts as well as outages, general outages. With regard to medical baseline, once you go to the Edison website, and you click under residential, you'll find very similar rebates programs, et cetera. There's 2 programs there that you might have interest. One is medical baseline, and that one provides discounts for customers who have medical devices. And the reason is because they use more energy because of those medical devices. In addition to that, it'll allow you, there's an online form that you can do, and you can click on critical care, and then that provides even more information and more care, with, if you will, with regard to the specific information based on the equipment that you provide and the other information you give us with regard to the severity of the impact if your equipment goes without power for longer than a 2-hour period. So those are both, the website is the easiest way, the most convenient, and the highest satisfaction way. But also, if you just want to call the call center, and that information will get you to a call center rep, and they can also sign you up as for either alerts or the medical baseline and critical care program.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark. Looks like we have a few more questions. Next question, how do I learn more about the self-generating incentive program and how do I qualify? So I know, Mark, you touched on that a little bit. You mentioned Edison's going back to the PUC to ask for some additional funds. Can you touch on where we at and when we expect to hear more on that?
Yeah, unfortunately, we had a conference last month on May 28th. I believe it was recorded. So under, again, the website, if you look under programs, rebates and programs, you'll see the SGIP program. In there, if it's not up there yet, there should be a recording of the workshop that we had on May 28th. And that shows information, provides information about the SGIP program. What is it? How do you get rebate funds for that program? The way it works today is there's certain allocations periodically that are governed with the Public Utilities Commission on their dates, and they're first come, first served. So very often those incentives go pretty quickly. And this is one of the reasons we've been working with the Public Utilities Commission to find out ways to spread those rebates and those incentive programs a little bit more broadly across our customer base.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Again, folks, if you have questions, please type them in the Skype Q&A. I'd love to answer as many as we can tonight. Bill, you had talked a little bit about grid hardening earlier in the presentation. Can you touch a little bit on that in relation to PSPS and what the goal is of grid hardening and in relationship to calling for a public safety power shutoff?
Yeah, certainly, Jeremy. So let me provide some maybe a little bit more detail and broader context. So as I mentioned, PSPS is really impactful for our customers. So we're doing everything we can to minimize its impact. And one of the ways that we do that is through a method we call sectionalizing. So part of the system hardening effort is adding additional devices that allow us to be able to isolate circuits into smaller portions of that. So by adding these additional sectionalizing switches, we're able to de-energize a smaller portion of the circuit. So that's one way through system hardening, we will improve or reduce the PSPS impact. The other thing that I mentioned is, or I may not have touched on the detail, is what we call switching playbook. One of the key lessons learned that we have through last year was when we only have a handful of circuit, it is much easier for those folks at the incident command center to make the right decision in selecting which switch to operate so that we can minimize the footprint. As Mark indicated, he was member of the incident command group. Likewise, I am also an incident commander. So, but in a situation where you have dozens of circuits all coming or reaching the wind threshold at the same time, the decisions that are being made in the moment are not optimized. And so one of the lessons learned that we have from last year was we want to develop a pre-canned switching program that are tailored to the specific conditions that are being observed at the time. So we essentially have developed switching programs for each of the circuits that we have in high fire risk area, and based on the actual conditions that we're observing, we can optimize the switching events or switching steps to minimize this impact. So that's another way where we're actually are able to reduce the PSPS. A third way that we're doing that is deployment of system hardening efforts such as cover conductor. By adding cover conductors, it will be able to withstand these type of incidents such as objects that get blown into the power line. So the more cover conductor we do, the more robust the system will be, and we'll be able to elevate the wind threshold for a particular area. So that's another way where a system hardening measure will also benefit PSPS or reducing the PSPS impact long term. Hopefully that gives you a little bit more context in how these two are connected. Thanks, Jeremy.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. We have another question. Mark, you had mentioned the critical care battery backup program that the pilot's going to start. How will Edison determine who will be part of the pilot? Is it first come, first serve?
It is not yet first come, first serve. What we're doing for the June and July installations is testing in areas that had the highest PSPS impact in 2019. So we're reviewing and prioritizing where some of the most vulnerable circuits are and the most vulnerable customers. And we're using that vulnerability. We have a vulnerability scoring, if you will. Think about someone who is not just low income, not just disabled, but also has critical care equipment and might also have transportation or other issues, or a second person similarly in the same house. And so we're doing our best to try to identify those folks first. They'll get probably the first 200 or so battery backup systems. And then after that, we're going to try to get to 1,500 other customers. So again, in the Cabazon area, I showed 11 customers that were critical care customers. That doesn't mean that they're necessarily low income customers. And I have roughly in our systems, we have roughly about 600 income qualified or low income customers, but not all of them are critical care. So we're going to be looking for both customers who are both critical care and low income at the same time. And then in September, it'll be the first come, first serve.
That's great. Thanks for that update, Mark. Earlier you had also touched a little bit on the portable generator rebates. Do you recommend a customer contacts SCE before they install any type of generator?
So we do have some information with regard to generator safety, and it's very important that the way the generators are used is directly with appliances themselves. You cannot just plug a generator into the wall and energize your home. It has safety implications if that happens with backfeeding power onto the grid, which could, if the power is out because there's a potential fire hazard, if you're plugging your generator into your wall, that could also be a fire hazard. You could have undone the protections we just put in place. So it is important to follow the safety guidelines from the battery manufacturers, as well as we have safety guidelines on our own website. And there's, in addition to the portable stations there, you'll see other rebates for other equipment. So that's, it's called SC Marketplace, and you can find it by going to the website we gave you on sce.com/wildfire. That can lead you into the marketplace.
Great. Thank you very much, Mark. So again, I just want to remind everyone, if you have any questions that didn't go unanswered tonight, please email us at wildfireoutreach@sce.com. And I really thank you and everyone for participating tonight. As mentioned earlier, you'll be receiving a survey to provide us feedback. In addition, this meeting has been recorded. You can view the recording and get more information that was presented tonight at sce.com/wildfire. Thank you again, and we wish you and your family good health and have a wonderful evening. This concludes our meeting.